He was an arrogant billionaire from Berlin, cold, proud, and feared by everyone who worked under his empire. During a business dinner in Washington, D.C., he shouted at a simple waitress in front of the whole restaurant. Everyone expected her to apologize, but instead she calmly replied with one sentence that silenced the room and froze him completely. Her words were the exact same ones his late wife had spoken years before her mysterious death. From that moment, his life began to unravel. Old secrets, guilt, and truths long buried started rising again. What began as one man's arrogance turned into a shocking journey of revenge, love, and redemption that would change both their lives forever. The Capitol lights shimmered faintly across the Potomac, reflecting in the tall windows of the Jefferson Grill, an elite Washington, D.C. restaurant where senators, diplomats, and billionaires came to feed both their appetites and their egos. It was a cold night, the kind that made even marble floors seem unfriendly. Inside, soft jazz played beneath the clinking of crystal glasses. Waiters glided silently, their faces fixed in polite masks of grace. At the corner table sat Victor Krauss, a name that carried more power in Berlin's financial corridors than most presidents commanded in their own capitals. His silver hair was combed back immaculately, his ice-blue eyes sharp as cut glass. Every movement he made was deliberate, economical, as if time itself obeyed him. Washington's elite whispered that he was impossible to please, a man who could buy anything but warmth. Tonight, he was proving them right. The maitre d' hovered nervously near his table. "Sir, your wine too warm," Victor interrupted without looking up. "And this steak," he continued, tapping his fork once against the plate, "is not medium rare. It's an insult." His deep German accent sliced through the air like a blade. The chatter around the room faltered. Across the dining hall, Emma Reed paused mid-step, a tray of dishes balanced carefully in her hands. She had seen arrogance before. It was common currency in this part of town, but there was something colder about this man, something that made her chest tighten. Emma had been working here for almost 10 years, long enough to read people like open books. But Victor Krauss wasn't a book. He was a locked safe. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly as she approached, her voice calm but firm. "Would you like me to have the chef redo your meal?" He looked up at her slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Redu, you think reheating perfection is possible?" Typical American hospitality, careless and untrained. Her grip tightened around the tray, though her expression remained neutral. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir." "Sorry," he repeated coldly. The one word Americans use when they have no standards left. Several tables turned to watch. The air grew heavy. Even the pianist hesitated on his keys. Emma could feel the sting of humiliation creeping up her neck, but something inside her refused to bend. She placed the tray down, folded her hands neatly, and said in a low, measured tone, "Maybe, sir, what you call standards are just ways to forget how to be human." The room went silent. Victor froze, the wineglass halfway to his lips. For the first time that evening, something flickered in his expression, a flash of recognition, disbelief, and something dangerously close to pain. Her words had landed somewhere far deeper than she could have known. Slowly, he set the glass down. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice no longer sharp but trembling slightly at the edges. Emma met his gaze, unflinching. "I said perhaps you've mistaken perfection for humanity." For a moment, the powerful Victor Krauss didn't speak. He simply stared at her, his jaw tightening, his breath unsteady. Then, almost imperceptibly, he whispered something under his breath, a name. "Elena." The sound was barely audible, but Emma heard it. Confusion rippled across her face. "I'm sorry?" Victor blinked as if waking from a trance. "Nothing," he said quickly, pushing his chair back. He stood abruptly, tossing a few $100 bills on the table. "You may tell your manager I'm leaving," but his composure was fractured. He reached for his coat, his hands unsteady. Guests watched as the great German billionaire walked out without another word. Outside, the cold wind bit through his tailored coat. He lit a cigarette, though he had quit years ago, and exhaled shakily. That woman's voice, her tone, her words, it was impossible. They were identical to something Elena had once said to him decades ago in Berlin, on the night before she died. He had buried those words, and yet tonight, spoken by a stranger, they came alive again. Maybe what you call standards are just ways to forget how to be human. The same sentence, the exact same phrasing. His pulse quickened. Could it be coincidence? No. There was something haunting about her face, too. Those calm eyes, that quiet sadness. He dropped the cigarette, crushing it underfoot, and turned toward his car. "Find out who she is," he said to his driver, as he slid into the back seat. The man looked puzzled. "Sir?" "The waitress," Victor said, staring blankly out the window. "Her name, her life, everything." The car pulled away from the restaurant, leaving behind only the echo of unanswered questions. Inside, Emma stood by the service counter, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't understand why his reaction had unsettled her so deeply. There had been fear in his eyes, real fear, the kind that comes from ghosts of the past. As she turned to finish her shift, her co-worker Marla whispered, "You okay, Emma? You just made a billionaire storm out." "That's either brave or crazy." Emma forced a small smile. "Maybe both." But as she cleared the untouched glass of wine from his table, she noticed something lying beside the napkin, a small silver cufflink engraved with a crest. A letter K entwined with a serpent. She picked it up slowly, studying it. The metal felt cold, almost alive. She didn't know why, but a chill ran down her spine. It felt less like an accident and more like a message. Outside, Victor's car sped through the wet streets of Washington, headlights slicing through fog. He couldn't shake her voice from his head. For years, he had buried the guilt of a night that ended in tragedy. But now, it seemed the past had found him, in the form of a waitress who shouldn't have known his secrets. And deep inside, something told him this was only the beginning. The night stretched long over Washington, but Victor Krauss didn't sleep. His penthouse overlooked the city skyline, yet even the glittering lights below couldn't distract him from the memory of that woman's words. Every syllable replayed in his mind with haunting precision. Elena's voice from the past, wrapped in a stranger's tone. He poured himself a drink he didn't need, his hands trembling slightly. The fireplace crackled behind him as if mocking his silence. "It can't be," he muttered, pacing the room. "She's gone." That was decades ago, but the mind plays cruel tricks on men with regrets. At dawn, his driver arrived with a sealed envelope. Victor tore it open, eyes narrowing as he read. Inside was a short report from a private investigator, efficient, discreet, expensive. Emma Reed, 43 years old, works at the Jefferson Grill for 10 years, lives alone in a small apartment in Georgetown. Former nursing assistant, widowed, no children. Victor read it twice. Something didn't add up. "Widowed?" he whispered. "No children?" A faint ache stirred in his chest, a feeling he had long forgotten, curiosity laced with fear. "Get the car ready," he said quietly. "I'm going to see her." Meanwhile, at the small Georgetown apartment, Emma stood by the window, sipping her coffee and staring at the grey sky. The cufflink sat on her kitchen table, catching the morning light. She had turned it over in her hands for hours, tracing the letter K, wondering why it unsettled her so deeply. Her late husband, Thomas, had once worked in European security contracts. Before he died, he'd told her stories of a man named Krauss, a German industrialist involved in secret political deals. But those were just names back then, rumors whispered across news articles. Could it be the same man? And why did he react that way to her words? She didn't know, but a strange sense of destiny seemed to hum quietly beneath her thoughts. She didn't know that, at that very moment, Victor Krauss's car was gliding silently through the streets toward her address. When the knock came, she almost didn't open the door. But something compelled her, a mix of apprehension and unfinished curiosity. She pulled the door slightly ajar. Victor stood there, his expression unreadable, his dark overcoat dusted with rain. "Good morning, Miss Reed," he said, his voice softer now, stripped of arrogance. "May I come in?" She hesitated. "You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be many places," he said quietly. "But here I am." Reluctantly, she stepped aside. The warmth of the small apartment seemed to disarm him. It smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of his world. He looked around, noticing the modest furniture, the framed photos on the shelf. One photo stopped him cold, a young Emma standing beside a man in uniform. "Your husband," he said softly. "Thomas Reed," she nodded slowly. "You know him?" "Once," Victor replied, eyes clouded. "He worked security for a summit I attended in Brussels. He was honorable," she frowned. "You remember him?" "I remember everyone who's ever looked me in the eye without fear." There was silence, heavy but not hostile. Finally he said, "Last night you said something. A sentence I've only heard once before. How do you know those words?" She blinked, confused. "I don't. I just said what came to me." "No," he insisted, stepping closer. "You said maybe what you call standards are just ways to forget how to be human. My wife said that to me the night she died." Emma's breath caught. "Your wife?" He nodded slowly. "Elena Kraus, 28 years ago. Car crash outside Berlin. But before that night, we argued. I told her emotions were weakness. She said those exact words before she left." Emma stared at him, disbelief and unease twisting inside her. "And you think what? It could somehow know that?" "I don't know," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "But when I looked at you, I saw her. The same calm, the same eyes, the same truth." She turned away, shaken. "You're mistaken." "I'm not her." "Maybe not," he said. "But fate rarely makes mistakes." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she faced him again. "Why are you really here, Mr. Kraus?" He hesitated, his expression softening. "Because I've spent half my life burying the man she accused me of being. And last night, when you spoke, I realized I hadn't buried him deep enough." Emma felt something shift in her chest, sympathy perhaps, or recognition of pain too long ignored. She gestured to the table. "You left this," she said, placing the cufflink before him. "I think it belongs to you." He picked it up slowly, turning it over in his hand. "This belonged to my father," he murmured. "He gave it to me the day I swore I'd never be like him." A faint smile touched her lips. "And yet, sometimes we become what we run from." He looked up, startled by her words. "You talk like her," he whispered. "Exactly like her." Emma crossed her arms. "Or maybe, Mr. Kraus, all broken men need someone to sound like the voice they silenced." He said nothing, only studied her face as if searching for something lost long ago. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. "There's something you should see," he said. "A file your husband once protected. It has your name on it." Her heart skipped. "What kind of file?" "The kind that explains why your husband was killed," he said quietly. Emma's blood ran cold. He died in an accident." Victor shook his head. "That's what you were told." The room seemed to tilt as his words sank in. Outside, thunder rolled across the grey morning, and the world suddenly felt smaller, colder, and far more dangerous than before. The thunder faded, but its echo lingered, rolling through Emma's thoughts like an omen she couldn't shake. She sat frozen, staring at the envelope Victor had left on the table. His words still burned in her ears. "That's what you were told." The quiet hum of the city beyond her window felt distant, unreal. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of government correspondence, stamped confidential, dated 15 years ago. Her eyes scanned the text. Thomas Reed listed as Security Liaison, US-EU Industrial Summit. Then one line caught her breath. Subject eliminated to protect Project Echo interests. Classified under Kraus Energy Holdings. Her pulse thundered. "Eliminated," she whispered. The word blurred before her eyes. She felt as if the floor had vanished beneath her. Across town, Victor sat alone in his study, staring into the fire, glass untouched beside him. He hadn't meant to tell her everything, not yet, but the truth had weighed on him for decades. Back then, he had believed in control, in the cost of empire. But when Project Echo began to unravel, lives were lost, and Thomas Reed's name was among them. A good man, collateral in a world built on power. Victor had buried that truth under money, until one sentence from a stranger reopened the wound. Emma's phone buzzed, snapping her back. "Unknown number." She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Reed," a calm male voice said, "we need to talk. You've seen something you shouldn't have." "Who is this?" she asked, heart racing. The line went dead. A shadow flickered outside her window. She hurried to the curtain, but the street below was empty except for rain. Fear crept cold down her spine. She grabbed her coat and slipped the papers into her bag. She didn't know where to go, only that she couldn't stay. At the same time, Victor's phone rang. Cole's voice came through, urgent. "Sir, your system's been breached. Someone's tracking your movements and hers." "I think—" Static crackled. The line dropped. Victor stood abruptly. The past he'd tried to confess to Emma was now alive and hunting them both. Half an hour later, he arrived at her apartment, the door ajar, lights flickering. "Emma?" he called. The room was empty, the window open. The rain had soaked the papers scattered across the floor. One photo remained dry, a younger Victor standing beside a group of men, one of them unmistakably Thomas Reed. Victor sank into a chair, the weight of guilt pressing into his chest. "Thomas," he whispered, "I never meant for it to end like this." Then a voice behind him, "Neither did I." He turned sharply. Emma stood in the doorway, drenched, pale, holding a small handgun. Her eyes blazed, not with hatred but with resolve. "You knew," she said, voice trembling. "You knew what they did." "Yes," Victor said quietly. "And I've been paying for it every day since." She stepped closer. "Why now? Why come to me?" "Because I'm dying," he said simply. "And I need someone to hear the truth before they erase us both." Her grip faltered. "Erase us?" He nodded slowly. Project Echo was never shut down. It changed names, moved underground. "The same people who killed your husband, they're watching you now." Her pulse quickened. "Then why tell me?" "Because," Victor said, voice breaking, "you deserve the truth more than I deserve peace." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the rain answered, tapping gently on the glass. Then she lowered the gun. "You're going to tell me everything," she said. He nodded. "I will, but not here." Outside, a black car idled quietly across the street. A man inside spoke into a radio, his eyes fixed on the apartment window. "Target confirmed. Both are inside." Inside, Victor turned toward Emma. "We have to leave, now." "Why should I trust you?" she asked. He met her eyes, and for the first time there was no arrogance, no manipulation, only truth. "Because they killed the only two people who ever made me human. I won't let them take the third." Before she could ask what he meant, a gunshot shattered the silence. The window exploded, glass raining across the room. Victor grabbed her arm and pulled her down. Tires screeched outside. He shoved a flash drive into her hand. "If anything happens to me, find the man named Keller at the State Archives. He knows how to end this." "Victor, wait." Another shot ripped through the wall. He pushed her toward the back door. "Go, Emma, run!" She hesitated for one last heartbeat, then sprinted out into the storm. When she looked back, the apartment was already engulfed in smoke. The sound of sirens began to wail somewhere in the distance. Emma clutched the flash drive against her chest, tears mixing with the rain. She didn't know where to go, but she knew one thing with painful certainty. Thomas's death was no accident. And the man who had once destroyed her life might now be the only one who could help her save it. The rain poured relentlessly over Washington, turning the streets into dark rivers of reflection as Emma ran through the night, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Her heart hammered against her ribs, every step echoing with fear and disbelief. The city lights blurred past her, distorted by rain and tears. She ducked into an alley, breathless, her hands trembling. Somewhere behind her, sirens screamed, a haunting reminder that someone was already cleaning up Victor's apartment. He might be dead or worse. She forced herself to move, the flash drive burning cold in her palm. Keller, he had said, the State Archives. But who was Keller? She didn't know, only that Victor trusted him. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she trusted Victor. Across the city, in a charred apartment now crawling with federal agents, Cole Anderson stood beside a body bag being zipped shut. He looked pale, shaken. The lead agent, a tall woman in a trench coat, turned to him. "We'll confirm DNA, but it looks like Krauss." Cole nodded numbly. "What about the woman?" Gone, the agent said. And whoever took her knows what that drive contains. Cole's eyes flickered. He didn't tell them that he had been the one who leaked Victor's location. He hadn't meant for it to end like this. But Project Echo had deep claws, and no one defied it for long. Meanwhile, Emma reached Union Station just as dawn crept over the horizon. The air was cold and metallic, the world eerily quiet. She slipped into the public restroom, locked herself inside, and finally allowed herself to breathe. She plugged the flash drive into her small tablet. A single encrypted folder appeared, titled Echo Files Classified. Her pulse quickened as she clicked. Dozens of documents loaded. Contracts, bank transfers, signatures, proof that Krauss Energy Holdings had financed covert operations across Europe under the guise of renewable energy investments. At the center of it all, Victor's name. But as she scrolled further, she froze. There was another signature beneath his. Thomas Reed, her husband, dated 2 weeks before his death. The room spun. He had been part of it. Not just a victim, but a witness. Or maybe something more. "Thomas," she whispered, voice cracking. "What did you do?" She barely noticed the sound of footsteps outside until it was too late. The restroom door creaked. A shadow fell across the tiles. A man's voice spoke softly. "Ms. Reed?" She turned sharply, eyes wide. The man was tall, grey-haired, wearing an old military coat. His eyes were tired but kind. "My name's Keller," he said quietly. "Victor sent me." Relief hit her like a wave, followed by suspicion. "He's alive." "Barely," Keller said. "They shot him, but he's breathing. He told me to find you before they do." He extended his hand. "We have to move, now." She hesitated, then nodded, pocketing the flash drive. They left through a side exit and slipped into an unmarked sedan. As they drove through the waking city, Keller spoke lowly. Project Echo wasn't just corporate corruption. It was an intelligence front. Energy contracts were used to fund surveillance and elimination of political threats. "Your husband found out. He tried to leak it." Emma stared at him. "And Krauss?" "He authorized it," Keller admitted. "But he didn't know the hit would go that far. When he realized it was too late, he spent years trying to dismantle what he created." She turned away, tears pooling in her eyes. "And now?" "Now," Keller said grimly, "you hold the key they've been looking for." He handed her a folded note. "Coordinates. Victor said, if anything happens to him, go there. It's where he hid the original files." She unfolded the note. Latitude and longitude scrawled in Victor's handwriting. "Where is this?" "An old observatory outside Arlington. But once we go there, there's no turning back." As they drove across the bridge, Keller glanced in the mirror. 2 black SUVs appeared behind them, headlights cutting through the fog. "They found us," he muttered. "Hold on." The car accelerated, tires screeching as they weaved through traffic. Bullets shattered the back window. Emma ducked, screaming as glass rained around her. Keller swerved sharply, slamming into an alleyway. "Run!" he shouted. She grabbed the flash drive and bolted into the darkness. Behind her, Keller fired 2 shots before the night swallowed the sound. Emma ran until her lungs burned, until the city turned into silence. Finally, she stopped, leaning against a wall, trembling. She looked down at the drive in her hand, tiny, fragile, yet holding enough truth to destroy empires. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. She took a deep breath, straightened, and whispered, "Hold on, Victor. I'll finish what you started." But what she didn't see was a figure watching her from across the street, hidden beneath a hood. Cole lowered his phone, whispering into an earpiece, "I have her. Proceed as planned." And as dawn broke over Washington, the game that began with a single sentence in a restaurant was now a deadly chase between guilt, justice, and secrets too powerful to stay buried. The morning light broke weakly over Washington, pale and cold, like the truth Emma carried. The city looked peaceful from the outside, but underneath, something darker pulsed, an invisible war of secrets and survival. Emma's clothes were soaked, her shoes ruined, but her resolve hardened. She followed Victor's coordinates across the river toward Arlington, each step echoing with fear and purpose. The streets grew quieter until the skyline faded behind her. Ahead stood an old observatory, its dome cracked, the structure surrounded by mist and overgrown ivy. It felt abandoned, yet alive, as if history itself waited there. She pushed open the rusted door. The air smelled of dust and rain. In the dim light, old papers covered a wooden table, maps, blueprints, and a small medical kit. Then she froze. Victor was there, pale, weak, wrapped in a torn coat, sitting near the table with blood dried on his sleeve. "You made it," he said softly, his voice rough but alive. Relief and anger collided in her chest. "You're supposed to be dead," he smiled faintly. "I was close enough." She knelt beside him, checking the wound. "Why didn't you go to a hospital?" Because hospitals ask questions," he said. "And I've had enough questions for a lifetime." She handed him a flask of water from her bag. "You lied to me. About many things," he admitted. "But not about this." He nodded toward the table. A hard drive sat there, black and marked with the Kraus family crest. "That," he said, "is Project Echo's core file. Every transaction, every order, every name. If it goes public, half the government will collapse." Emma's throat tightened. "Then let it collapse. And what replaces it?" he asked. "Chaos? Revolution? The innocent pay first." She stood angry. "So we do nothing?" "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "We do what's right, carefully." Before she could answer, footsteps echoed from outside, slow, deliberate, deadly. Victor tensed. "They found us." Emma's pulse spiked. She grabbed the hard drive and shoved it into her coat. The door burst open. Cole entered, his face pale but steady, flanked by two armed men. "Emma," he said gently, "put it down." She stared at him, realization dawning. "You were working for them all along." "I was working for survival," Cole said. "And now you're both in the way." His voice cracked slightly. "Give me the drive. I'll make sure you live." Victor stepped forward, unarmed but unflinching. "Don't do this, Cole. You still have a choice." Cole's jaw tightened. "You had your chance to choose. You built this." He nodded to one of the men. "Take her." In that split second, Victor moved, fast for his age, grabbing a metal rod and striking the gunman's arm. The weapon fired, the shot deafening in the small space. Emma ducked, grabbing a fallen gun. Cole aimed, but Victor shouted, "Run!" Emma hesitated only long enough to see Victor tackle Cole to the floor. Another shot rang out. Victor grunted, collapsing against the wall. Emma screamed, but he waved her off, blood spreading across his chest. "Go!" he gasped. She ran, out the door into the rain again, her breath ragged and heart pounding. Behind her, the sound of sirens rose, echoing across the valley. She didn't look back until she reached the road and saw flames flicker in the distance where the observatory once stood. Hours later, the world woke to headlines that would shake nations. Project Echo exposed. Global energy scandal under investigation. Anonymous sources had leaked files containing decades of corruption, espionage and assassinations. No one knew who had done it, but the truth was out. Emma sat in a quiet cafe miles away, hood pulled low, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she couldn't taste. She watched the screen as reporters dissected Victor's name, some condemning him as a traitor, others calling him a hero. She whispered to herself, "You kept your promise." A man slid into the seat across from her. "Keller." "You did it," he said quietly. "The world's finally seeing what they buried." She nodded, eyes distant. "What about Victor?" Keller hesitated. "His body wasn't found. But that fire, no one could have survived." She stared at her reflection in the coffee's dark surface. "He's gone," she said softly. "Maybe that's what he wanted." Keller placed a small envelope on the table. "He asked me to give you this if he didn't make it." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single note, handwritten in his careful, elegant script. Elena was right. Humanity matters more than legacy. Thank you for reminding me. VK. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled, a quiet, sad smile of peace. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and steady. The city lights glowed faintly beneath it. She stood, slipping the note into her pocket, and walked into the morning light. Somewhere behind her, a man in a long, dark coat watched from across the street, his silver hair glinting under the snow. He turned away and disappeared into the crowd. And with that, the arrogant billionaire from Berlin, who once yelled at a waitress and found redemption in her courage, vanished forever into the silence of a world finally learning what it meant to be human.